welcome. My name is Luann Pygott. It is Sunday evening, and I am going to read you some verses from the Bible and play you a couple of songs, and I pray that this will be a blessing to you. So this is a little bit of a spin-off from last week, just slightly, because I heard somebody say something about this story in the Bible. I did not make this up, but I heard it from somebody else, but it was so good I wanted to share it with you. And I'm titling my message today, God Will Provide. So whatever circumstances you are in right now, God is going to provide for you. And this is a story of God providing. This story I'm going to read to you is about, it's like multiple things of God providing. It has multiple meanings. This is from Genesis 22, 1 through 18. After these things, God tested Abraham. Remember last week I was talking about our faith has not been tried and has not been tested, cannot be trusted. So this says, after these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am. I think it's interesting how it says God, Abraham always says, here I am. You'll notice in here he says that more. God said, take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. It's interesting that he says, take your son, your only son. The other son that Abraham had with Hagar apparently was not the promised son, and was not one that God really was even counting, because when he was speaking about Isaac, he says, take your son, your only son, Isaac. That was the son God was counting as the one that he had promised. But I think the reason God wanted Abraham to have one son and one only son is because that's what God has. And he was wanting to use Abraham as an example of sacrificing your one and only son, because God was going to do that. He was planning to do that. He was planning to do it through the Israelites, which were Abraham's descendants. And he set this all up so that the descendants of Abraham would understand that the Messiah was coming from them. Now, that was his intent. Unfortunately, they still didn't understand it. They still didn't get it, but he showed them so many ways and so many times what he was doing. He told them outright. It was prophesied in Isaiah. It was prophesied in many ways. It was said from the beginning of time. When he told Adam and Eve, I'm going to send someone to bruise your heel, and you will bruise his heel, he will bruise your head. He just told from the beginning. And even so, they still didn't get it. But he was using Abraham as an example to show how he was going to give his own son. So it says, so Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. On the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. It's interesting to me that it took him 3 days to get there. And it was the 3rd day that Christ rose again. It's all so symbolic, all of it, every little thing, even the fact that it took him 3 days to get where God was sending him. And it took Jesus 3 days to raise from the dead. God makes everything point to what he had promised them. It says, then Abraham said to his young men, remember the other people that were with him, stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. Again, very symbolic of Jesus carrying his own cross. Jesus carried his own cross to Golgotha, and Isaac was carrying what was would have been like his own cross. He was carrying the wood as well. It's just also interesting. And he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So they went, both of them together, and Isaac said to his father Abraham, my father. And he said, here I am, my son. There he is again saying, he said it to God earlier, here I am. And he said, Abraham, and he said, here I am, my son. And he said, behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? I love what Abraham says here. He didn't just say, I don't know yet. You'll see in a minute. He spoke to me. He spoke into existence what happened next. But it's so prophetic what he said, not only for what was going to happen for him, but what was going to happen with Christ. Abraham said, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. So they went together, both of them. Isn't it interesting how he did not say, God will provide us a lamb? He didn't say that. He said, God will provide for himself. And notice he says, the lamb. not a lamb, at least in this version. God will provide for himself the lamb. God had provided himself the lamb from the beginning of the foundation of the world. Christ was already in place. He had already provided it. But Abraham, of course, was looking for an actual sacrifice. He not only was prophetically speaking what God would do one day, which was, I think, what God was wanting to place into his word. He was wanting this to happen, but he also was speaking prophetically that God will provide a lamb when we get up there on the mountain too. So when they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. I always find this fascinating that you never hear that Isaac, we don't really know how old he was, but it apparently he didn't put up a fight. You know, if you went somewhere with your father to make a sacrifice and he had a knife in his hand and you're saying, where's the lamb? And he said, oh, God will provide. And you get up there and he takes you to tie you up and you don't put up a fight. It's interesting, isn't it? Would you put up a fight? Your father said, you know, it's you. I'm gonna kill you now. You probably would. You would think, my father's lost his mind. He's gone crazy. I got to get out of here. I got to save my life. But you know, it never shows that Isaac put up a fight. Maybe that was the level of obedience he had to his father. And I think it was also symbolic of the level of obedience Jesus had to his father. When he came, even though he prayed, Lord, if it's possible, let this pass from me. Well, it wasn't possible. It wasn't possible with the plan that God had in place. I mean, it wouldn't have been possible for us to be saved if God had changed it. So Jesus did not resist what God asked him to do. And it looks like the same way Isaac did not either. When his father tied him up and laid him on the altar, it looks like he just submitted to what his father was going to do. This says, then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. He was really going to go through with it. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. Isn't it interesting that he says it twice? He says it twice. Abraham was so focused on obeying God, no matter how horrific the task was to do. He was so focused on doing, I must do what God told me to do, that the angel had to say his name twice to get his attention. Abraham, Abraham. And he said, what did he say again? This is the third time it says he said this. Here I am. And he said, do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. So we know that this was a test. This was the testing of Abraham's faith. But it is showing that Abraham was not going to withhold his only son, but with him and Sarah. He was not withholding it from God, and God, in turn, was using that to show us he was not withholding his only son from us, so we could all have our lives saved. And Abraham lifted up his eyes. Now, this is the interesting part. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram, caught in a thicket by his horns. Wasn't there before. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So it was like, this is another thing showing Christ, the person who deserved to die, me and you. We had a substitute die in our place. So Isaac, who was set to die because God had said, sacrifice him. Instead of him dying, a sacrifice was offered in his place, just like Jesus became the sacrifice offered in our place. So Abraham called the name of that place, the Lord will provide. What a great name. As it is said to this day, on the mount of the Lord, it shall be provided. On the mount of the Lord, it shall be provided. This is what I heard about this story. I just happened to hear this in a clip. I heard it on a clip on YouTube, I think it was. But it's really good. When Abraham was walking with Isaac up the mountain, because God sent them to Mount Moriah to make the sacrifice. When he was walking up one side of the mountain to the place where God told him to go, unbeknownst to him or anyone else, the ram was walking up the other side. Probably. Because he wasn't there before. He didn't see him before. He just got caught in the bushes. So while you are heading to do what God has called you to do and what God has asked you to do, while it may look bleak where you are at, God has a provision for you heading up the other side that you cannot see. You don't know it's coming. You don't see it's coming. But Abraham even spoke prophetically about it, not even knowing it. Not even knowing, saying God will provide himself a lamb. He didn't really even know. He just thought it was going to be Isaac. But he spoke that word, and God brought it to pass in spite of Abraham's understanding. And he called the name of the place, the Lord will provide. And I think we can call, wherever we are right now, in your life, you can call the name of your mountain, God will provide. Because wherever you are and whatever you're going through and whatever's missing from your life or whatever you think you're going to need in your life and things that you may not even yet know you're going to need, God has somewhere got that heading your way. Something somewhere is heading your way. And see, I look at this as such hope for my own life. The things that are so missing in my life that I am still looking for God to provide somewhere that thing or that person or that whatever it is heading my way. And at some point, it's on a collision course with me. And God is going to provide it to me. I don't know when, I don't know where. Some days I wonder, am I just going to be in need like this the rest of my life? This is going to be as good as it gets? I hope and pray not. But I really feel somewhere out there, the provisions for my future and the provisions for what God has promised me and told me and the dreams he's put in my heart, I feel they're out there heading for me somewhere. I just can't see them. But someday they're going to cross my path and we're going to meet and God is going to supply the needs. And I will say, this place in my life is now named, the Lord will provide. And the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, by myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you. Because he had obeyed in the bleakest time of his life, in the most heartbreaking time of his life, because he really thought he was going to have to go through with it, in what would have been the emptiest time of his life. And you imagine him having to go back and tell Sarah what he'd done? In the most, like, it looked like I was going to have every dream I'd ever had, and then it's going to be gone. In that time of his life, because he obeyed, the angel of the Lord is telling him, the Lord says, I will surely bless you. Because he held on in the bleak times, in the empty times, and in the time of what looked like it was going to be loss, he now opened up the windows of blessing. And he says, I will surely multiply your offspring. Because remember, he only had one that God was counting, Isaac. I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven and as the sand that is on the seashore, and your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies. You know what that says to me right there, that verse? You know who possessed the gate of his enemies? Oh, we all do. The Lord has promised us all that we will possess the gate of our enemies. But who really, ultimately possessed the gate of his enemies was Jesus. He was the descendant of Abraham. And it says your offspring. And I think it's specifically referring to Christ here, although it can mean all of us. Your offspring, when I send my son, he's going to possess the gates, or the gate of his enemies, because he overcame the gates of hell and of death, hell and the grave. He overcame that. He possessed the gates, or the gate of his enemies. And your offspring shall through your offspring, or in your offspring, shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. Haven't we been? We've all been blessed because of that one offspring of Abraham, because you have obeyed my voice. Psalm 84:11 says, for the Lord is a sun and shield. The Lord bestows favor and honor. No good thing does he withhold from those who walk uprightly. Psalm 145:15 and 16 says, the eyes of all look to you, speaking to God, and you give them their food in due season. You open your hand. You satisfy the desire of every living thing. Philippians 4:19 says, and my God will supply every need of yours according to his riches in glory in Christ Jesus. That's one of my favorite verses. He will supply every need. Matthew 6:31 through 32 says, therefore do not be anxious. You know, that can be hard for us to do sometimes. It's so easy to be anxious because we don't see the provision coming. We don't see the answer God already sent on its way. We don't see it. Then in one time when Daniel was praying, the angel finally came to him. Wasn't it like 19 days later or something like that? 21 days later, what it was, about 3 weeks later. And he said, I came the first minute you prayed. I started heading your way. God sent me. But the enemy stopped me, and I had to fight that war to get to you. God already has it coming your way. It's just not there yet. But do not be anxious, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? For the Gentiles seek after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them all. Matthew 7:11 says, if you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, just like we do at Christmas. We all give good gifts to our children. But yet, we, compared to God, we're evil. But if we can do that, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good things to those who ask him? Luke 12:24 says, consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouse nor barn, yet God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than the birds? We were so much value to God that he sent his own son to save us. He could have said, y'all messed up. Adam and Eve, you messed up. You messed it up for the human race. He could have just let them die off and started over. He could have done any number of things. But he said, no, I'm going to save the creation that I already created. I'm going to give you a way to be saved. And I was thinking about this. I had come up with this to talk about. And then I was thinking, now that Thanksgiving is over, I really kind of want to play Christmas songs because it's almost Christmas. And I'm like, man, I wish I could tie this to Christmas. And I'm like, well, of course I can tie this to Christmas. You can tie anything in the Bible to Christmas because Christmas is when the beginning of the fulfillment of the Messiah happened, when he was actually born. And I'm like, well, of course I can tie this to Christmas because it's talking about God providing. And he had provided the Messiah before us before he ever even created us. He was there waiting. He was there waiting to be our redemption before we were even thought about, except by God thought about us. But before anybody else ever knew we were going to be born, our salvation was already there. You just have to accept it. So I'm going to play actually a couple of Christmas songs that talk about the coming of the Messiah and waiting for the coming of the Messiah. And the first one, I'm only going to play the chords. It's a minor key. It's a little more difficult. And I like to sing. I've heard this sung really, really slow. I actually kind of like it a little faster. And so I'm going to sing this one. This one, when was this even written? Well, this version of it was written in 1976. But it says this tune is late 9th century Latin. So apparently it's a really old tune. It is called O Come, Emmanuel. And Emmanuel was one of the names of Christ. And I pray that, I just love Christmas songs. I pray that these will bless you. O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel, that mourns in lonely exile here, until the Son of God appear. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. O come, thou day spring, come and cheer our spirits by thine advent here. Disperse the gloomy clouds the hearts of all mankind. Bid thou our sad division cease, and be thyself our Prince of Peace. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. And this one, I don't know if a lot of people know this song. It's from 1976. Like I said, I don't know if that's the arrangement of this. It was written by Charles Wesley, so you know what's a lot earlier than 1976. Charles Wesley is old. But it is called Come, Thou Long Expected Jesus. Come, thou long expected Jesus, born to set thy people free from our fears and sins. Release us, let us find our rest in thee. Israel's strength and consolation, hope of all the earth, thou art dear desire of every nation, joy of every longing heart. Born thy people to deliver, born a child and yet a king, born to reign in us forever. Now thy gracious kingdom bring, by thine own eternal Spirit, rule in all our hearts alone. By thine all-sufficient merit, raise us to thy glorious throne. That is such a pretty song. Come, thou long expected Jesus. Romans 8:32 says, He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? 2 Corinthians 9:8, and God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that having all sufficiency in all things at all times, there's three things right there: all sufficiency and all things at all times, you may abound in every good work. You know, you can't do a lot of good works unless you have all sufficiency in all things at all times. You've got to have something to do the good works with. You can't give what you don't have. So God is able to give you all sufficiency in all things at all times. And why he's doing that is so you may abound in every good work. And finally, Isaiah 55:11 says, so shall my word that goes out from my mouth, it shall not return to me empty. What God has said in telling us he is going to provide for us, it is not going to return without having been fulfilled. But that word, it shall accomplish that which I purpose and shall succeed in the thing for which I sent it. He has got his word and provisions are heading your way. They are out there. They're on the move. They're heading in. You just haven't seen them and they haven't yet crossed your path. But one day, as you continue on in obedience to God, one day you're on a collision course with your provisions and what God has promised you. and you're going to meet one day. And everything in your life that God has promised will be fulfilled. May you be blessed until next week. Good night.